Tim Goldstein, autistic adult, and your host for Life in a Neurotypical Universe, where we take a look at life from the perspective of an autistic adult. Welcome back as we continue our conversation with Peter Mann. For those of you just joining us, this is the second episode because Peter and I were chatting about our favorite things and we just kept on chatting. So if you missed the first part, go on back and listen to the first part because there's lots of good stuff. And if you're just joining now, just a little bit of detail before you get a chance to listen to the first stuff is Peter was a Navy officer. He was also an executive at Dell Computers, and he has founded a couple manufacturing companies and currently runs his own manufacturing company doing air purifiers and quite successfully. And he is working on hiring more autistic individuals because Peter is also a late diagnosis adult autistic. So listen on in as Peter and I continue to chat and talk about all the things that we like talking about. Any thoughts on why is it we have all these great kids today, bright kids, great educations, but don't seem to have that, well, it didn't work once, but that wasn't a failure. That was a learning experience to get better on the next go.
Yeah, I think it's, wow, there's a lot to the question. I mean, I'm on the older end of Gen X, and I think you were like this too. But like, parenting was something that, you know, we got up in the morning. I was one of 5 kids, and my mom was just like needed a break, and so we were basically just kind of pushed out into the world and, you know, in the morning, and you'd come home, make yourself lunch, and then you'd go out in the afternoon, and nobody knew where you were, what you were doing. And, you know, you just kind of, you know, were very independent. And as part of that, you figure things out. And like, that's kind of been my whole like childhood is independence and kind of being off on your own and figuring things out. And the school system had 70s and, you know, early 80s, like the diagnosis rates for autism was maybe 1 in 2,500. I don't know the exact
right,
numbers, but it
horrible.
was like, unless you were like super, super high support needs, it's like, no, you're just a weird kid. And so you have no support. And you really just have to, you know, it's sink or swim on your own and figure things out. And so that's kind of like what life was like. And it wasn't easy. I think it's almost harder later in life if you went through the school system and you got really good grades and you didn't have failures and you didn't have struggles, because when you get out in the real world, it's not that way. Like, you know, the market doesn't care about you, right? It's
right.
like, and there's no, it's kind of like, I don't know if you follow Simon Sinek, but he talks about game theory and, you know, finite, infinite games. And school is like a finite game where there's like known rules. And then you get out in like in the real world or the business world, and it's an infinite game. And I think if you grow up in one structure and then you get thrown into the other one, you're in some ways not prepared for that. And I think how you're, you know, parented or, I mean, not to criticize the parents, but it's kind of like sometimes if kids, this is just my personal opinion, have not, you know, just because I've like suffered through things that I think later has made me stronger to be able to maybe be more resilient or persistent on things. Whereas if I've never experienced that before, it can hit you really hard later in life. And I think in some ways it's not the kid's fault. It's just the environment that they're part of, or the culture that they're part of, which makes their lives easier when they're younger, but in many ways more difficult when they're older. And that's just my personal theory of, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you. I think I'm a fan of Nietzsche. I don't know if you're a fan of much philosophy, but Nietzsche's the one who's known for the saying of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm not recommending you try and go out and see how close you can get to killing yourself by any means, but that's kind of really, I think, the generation we grew up in of the challenges were put in front of us. The parents didn't have cell phones tracking us and making sure and monitoring us every step of the way. And we were allowed to fail. You wanted to try something. I had parents that were super, super encouraging of whatever I wanted to try. When I was 13 years old, I wanted to build a canoe. And I remember I found a kit online. Well, actually, it wasn't online. It was way too young. This was back in the late 60s, early 70s. So I think it was the Whole Earth catalog, if you remember the Whole Earth catalog.
Yeah.
For all you younger folks, it was like the internet in book form. And I found a company that had a canoe kit that was within the range of what I could afford on my little paper route allowance. And I remember going with Mom in the old Ford station wagon and strapping it onto the roof rack on the top. And at 13 years old, I built a canoe all by myself. Mom, Dad, nobody helped. It was just figure it out, have fun. I don't think most people let kids at 13-year-olds go build things like that these days. They'll let them play with a computer. Okay, you can go, if you want to learn how to program and become a script kiddie and crash websites, have at it. But
yeah, for sure. It's different. I reflecting back, I now see that my dad was autistic as well. And I think for me, that was very helpful in that, things ran in a very structured way. Like we did things at very specific times. And there was a routine and a structure that I now see was very beneficial for me in providing a lot of stability and support and a really strong foundation. And where I struggled was school, which it was just chaos as far as I was concerned. And that's kind of where I struggled. And so I think for me, it was helpful to have like a good foundation at home and then to go off to school, like for however many hours that was, and really have a hard time and then come back to where it was, kind of more in my element or more, independence for myself. And so it was kind of I guess a good mix. And I guess where I was going with that is, I think that's really important. And I think for autistic people, the schools are so much better at diagnosing it now than they were back then. But there's this realization that there's all these people that are still undiagnosed, unaware that they're autistic, and generations of people that were never, like my dad, that were never, that lived an entire life without ever having any of this awareness. And so for me, I feel very grateful, even though it's later in life, to have been discovered or, the diagnosis, because I got the rest of my life and, to maybe try and help other folks through that. I feel like I'm like meandering a little bit here, my train of thought, but I just, I kind of have mixed feelings around how people are now. I know there's progress that takes place with what people want in a job environment or a work environment. And it's really kind of swung from where it was. And in many ways it's better, but maybe in some cases it's kind of maybe not best set up for the individual. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
Makes sense. I think there's a couple things you hit upon. One is I'm convinced that we are creating generations of disabled autistic kids. They're not disabled because they're autistic. They're disabled because they got so sheltered that they didn't get that experience you and I had of experiencing failure. Here's your participation ribbon. Oh, your IEP says this. We're going to take you by the hand and guide you through. and they didn't learn. I like to say that I'm convinced that success is littered with failure on both sides of the road behind you, is things that you learned from, but you got to keep going. You can't just stop at the first one and say, oh, I'm done, never again. And then the other thing that you said that I think is definitely fits with for a lot of parents. I'm convinced my dad was autistic also. Again, not diagnosed, but just based upon the career he went into, how he was totally not social, those kind of things. And actually my mom, I'm convinced was autistic, and she, at least I got to tell her that I think you're autistic, Mom. And I was with her the last 4 or 5 days before she passed. And she finally said to me, I think you're right. I always thought it all came just from your dad, but I think I'm the one. I'm autistic also. And then she passed a few days later.
Oh.
But I think where that figures in, though, is so many autistic parents, or they have kids who are diagnosed, and they find out they've got an autistic child, and now they want to do everything they can to neuronormalize them, turn them into being like them. But what they don't realize is, just like what you and I are saying, our parents were probably autistic, and science thinks right now about 80% of autism is hereditary. So why do you want your child to be treated and have all these things done to change them into something different than what you are already? I mean, are you not just happy with yourself? I mean, what's the...
Yeah, I think it's so for me, I'm sure my dad was autistic and my mom clearly is not. She's the social extroverted neurotypical. And I always thought she was so weird growing up because she's so different from me. And then I, at some point realized, oh wait, she's kind of the more common one. I'm the one that's the weirdo. And that kind of started my, interest really in elementary school in human behavior, just because, it was clear I was different. And, my dad never said this to me, but my mom would regularly scold me for not looking people in the eye. If I look someone in the eye, my brain more or less shuts down. And so I'm left with do you want me to listen to your question and answer it as best I can and be judged for not looking you in the eye? Or do you want me to look you in the eye and not be able to answer your question and then be judged for not being able to answer a question? It's like a lose-lose scenario. And so, you learn to mask as part of that. I think, that it's a survival tactic. But I think it's an issue of awareness. And so, neurotypicals have ways of, assessing trust in other people. And this is the way society views things. This is the proper way to do it, or the way it's always been done in terms of social interactions. And my mom, I see, was really just trying to look out for me because that's how society is. And so she would more or less, scold me or tell me things really, I think, with the right intent, but not knowing that what she's doing in some cases can create trauma.
Right.
Because it's I don't know how to do what you're asking me to do. It's not that I don't understand what you're telling me. It's just physically, I can't do it. And there's things in conversations that neurotypicals do just automatically that for me is a mechanical process where I'm having to think through everything. And it's in the 70s, there's if you're not diagnosing hardly anyone for autism and not having awareness for what autism even is, even in present day, I didn't know a few years ago much about autism, and I was autistic and I have the lived experience. And so I think it's natural for a neurotypical parent to want to have their kid fit in and be successful and not struggle. But I think if you understand that you can be introducing trauma into a kid when you're asking them to do things that are so outside of how they're wired, and it's And I think if a parent like was faced with like, do you realize that you're causing trauma in your child by doing this? They would probably take a step back and reevaluate it, what they're asking their child to do. But I think to your point, at the same time, I think as an autistic kid living in a neurotypical world, you're beaten up regularly around different things, or you're judged for being different because there's this invisible social hierarchy, and we're at the bottom of it. And I think if you're autistic, you're well aware that you're the minority that's more or less, I think, demonized in a lot of social situations. And so I think autistic kids do go through a lot of things, but I think it's good to keep pushing out into the world. And for me, it was I had this security blanket almost at home, and then I could go out into the world and figure things out and then come back and, go back and forth. And for me, almost like recharge my batteries in some cases, especially as it related to school, which was really difficult. And so for me, that's really what worked. I think if my home environment was chaotic and not at all supportive, or I don't know, I perhaps I would be where I am, but it's hard to know. But I think part of caring about your kid who's autistic is really trying to understand where they are and where they're coming from and what what they need to be successful, which may be different than how you're wired and what you think is needed to be successful.
It's kind of interesting. The organization I work for, they have different mailing lists for. There's one for autistics. You have to identify or be diagnosed as being autistic to be on that list. So it's a safe place for people who identify as autistic. Then there's another one that is for discussing anything around autism, and it's primarily parents that have autistic children. Because if you're autistic, you go to the other list because you're talking about specific autistic things.
Yeah.
And every time, not every time, but frequently I would read the parents asking questions about what to do about their autistic kid. And I just want to go, I don't know, punch somebody. Nobody in particular. I mean, it wasn't aimed at a person. It was just a general frustration of the same old things just being repeated over and over again of what to do with your autistic kid that, knowing myself, would have harmed me more than it would have helped me. So what I actually did was put together a group for the autistic parents, but brought in autistic adults to speak to them. Because most parents of autistic kids have only heard from the medical world. And in the medical culture, it's all, we're going to fix it. We got to cure it. We got to get intervention on it. We got to do all these kind of things. But what they don't get to hear is you and me and the experience of adult autistics, which, as you say, it can totally change how they're thinking about it when they can hear, hey, that kind of thing was harmful to me as a kid.
Yeah.
I don't care what the medical world's telling you. They're telling you what it's going to do for the kid today. They're not telling you about what it's going to do for the kid 20 years down the road. Whereas you and I can tell them the journey 20, 30, 40 years down the road of how these things were beneficial or harmful to who we are today. So I think that's something that just is so important, is getting the stories of adults like us out where parents of autistic kids hear them and hear where the struggles we had that, well, yeah, they were struggles. And to the parents, it was probably hurt them some seeing their kids struggling like that. But we recognize that it made us successful adults. So I just, think that's just such an important area that we need to try and get more effort of getting parents, when they have a diagnosis of an autistic child, to get them to hear from autistic adults to understand that there's a lot more to it than the doctors are telling them. And not that the doctors are holding back and trying to tell them the wrong thing. They're telling them, though, what to do for today. They're not telling them about what to do for 40 years later.
I was watching I can't remember the name of it, but it was a documentary that came out a few years ago. I think it was based on a book written by this Japanese autistic boy. and there was one scene, I think it was in the UK, where there was this electrical like box that was making a buzzing sound, and the kid could hear it. The autistic kid could hear it from far away, and got up to it and was just mesmerized by it. And it was just all consuming. And the dad goes, "I wish I knew what was going on in his head."
Yeah.
And I watched it, and it's like, holy cow, I have a really good idea what's going on in his head. Like, along the lines of monotropism, or, really just being like really focused and lost in something, and what that feels like. And I've always recognized that neurotypical people don't have that gear like you can shift into when you're really hyper focused on something. It's just, to me, I don't think it exists for them.
Yeah.
And watching that, it's like, holy cow, like we really need to, I think if you're a parent and have an autistic kid, you can't figure out like what they're thinking about. I think listening to other autistic adults that are able to communicate, I think could shed a lot of light on what's going on, and know a lot more than the neurotypical medical people are telling you about what's going on. And I think the best like therapists, or the best people that I've seen advice from, are other people who are autistic that are also in this, particular field.
Mm-hmm.
Because they bring the lived experience. And it's like in anything else, it's like, if you have the lived experience, it's like you have the perspective. And it's weird to me. And I think it's because that autism was not really diagnosed until, I don't know, properly till, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That there's this whole field of the doctor knows best, or the science person knows best. And in many cases, they're not autistic, and they don't have the lived experience, and they don't have input from people with the lived experience. There's like a piece missing,
right,
from that, which is pretty fundamental piece.
No, very much so. I think that is one of the challenges. If we could somehow get when a child is diagnosed, if we could get the medical professional to, I don't know, pass them on to, here's some podcasts, here's a book to read for the parents. I mean, whatever, just give them some perspective from the side of individuals who have the lived experience of being autistic, so that the parent can relate. Because I almost think autism is a two-stage kind of condition. There's the childhood stage, where we're trying to keep them from being in too much trouble, and which they let our kids go out and cause so much problem that they are going to get harmed. Or I certainly caused enough problems that I lived in the principal's office. We were on first name basis.
Oh my gosh!
And that, I guess nowadays that wouldn't be allowed. You would get IEPs and all this stuff to take care of it, but. I don't know. I kind of enjoyed hanging out in the principal's office. This was back long enough. They had mimeograph machines, and the smell off the mimeograph machines. And talk about VOCs, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you got to run mimeographs in the principal's office, and he had World War II books, and so I'd pour over the World War II books. And to me, that was actually better than going out in the playground. So maybe that's part of why I always was in trouble, because then I got to the principal's office, which was better than being in the social situation of being on the playground.
Yeah, it's funny. I was the same way, but not, I would never react outwardly. I would shut down, and I would just, I think, feel so much stress and anxiety that I would, say I felt sick, and I would go to the nurse's office. Mm. And for me, it's like, she was the most impactful person in my elementary school years, was the school nurse, because I could go to her office. It was quiet. It was just, she was like a Mr. Rogers type person or lady. And it just calmed me down and centered me. And it got me out of the chaos of the class. And, academically, I was at the bottom of my classes. It was a real struggle. I was with kids that were just, troublemakers, or, the worst kids in the school. That's the class. That's kind of where I was. But it was just the nurse is the one that got me just through. It was the only, I wouldn't call it therapy, but it was the only like calming influence I really had in the school, because there was no support system. But just getting in that quiet room to me was like the biggest thing. And I think, sometimes if a neurotypical parent doesn't understand sensory sensitivity, doesn't understand what creates anxiety, and they view things from the way they're wired, you're completely missing like why your kid can be just acting out or struggling. And the kid may not be able to really articulate it because he or she doesn't really understand it themselves.
Right. Right. I barely understand it as an adult. I mean, how was I going to understand it as a kid? Right. For me, the challenge was always, as is fairly common for autistic kids, I got bullied. And how that one always works, you get bullied, so then you go and beat them up.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, they start it, but you finish the job because you basically have a meltdown on them. And of course, who's the one that always gets caught? Not the person that started it.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of my challenge. Well, I know you're spending more of your time and more of your effort now on making people aware of autism and neurodiversity. What are you doing? What are you thinking? What do you want to accomplish?
Yeah. So, I started, researching it a lot more. And one of the things I did, this was, I guess, almost a year ago, I did a LinkedIn post where I just offered to speak with folks that were autistic trying to enter the workplace or survive the hiring process. And, offered up, happy to meet with you or do a video call or whatever. And I met with dozens of autistic folks, and it was pretty heartbreaking to hear the stories of what the hiring process was for them, and to see some statistics on how high the unemployment rate is for autistic adults, because autistic kids grow up to be autistic adults, right?
Yeah, amazing how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And, it was just really like, gosh, like I think I was lucky, in some ways. And, I know I struggled in some interviews, but I was able to do enough to get through. But I think I, masked seriously to survive, the hiring process. But for me, I'd get to, senior manager, director level at these big companies, and I kind of really didn't see a future for myself, because I'm not political. I just want to get the work done. I don't want to go to these parties. I don't want to, I don't schmooze or, do all of those other things that in, some big companies is kind of almost a unwritten requirement to move up.
Right.
And I saw some folks that got moved up ahead of me that I'm like, this person is just not as good as a worker as I am, but I don't do the social things that they do. So it's the only thing I could attribute it to. But, in talking with, so many folks, and then chatting with some others on social media, it's just a level of frustration in the autistic community for just like, and just the total talent loss that's not being utilized, to me is a huge problem. And it seems like not very difficult to fix. I've talked to some people that, well, for one, I would say most autistic folks don't even want to disclose they're autistic because they're met with negative consequences. Mm-hmm. Like their interviews get canceled, or they're one question in and they're like, tell me about yourself. And they're like, don't know where to go. Because it's like, as an autistic, if you're a bottoms up detailed person, it's like that question is just like, oh, like your head kind of explodes. And it's like, where do you even begin? And where do the, and if you can't make eye contact, which I'm not good at doing, and I know, a number of other folks aren't as well, you're just like the body language, which is your first impression that you make on someone, isn't positive, you're already starting off at a deficit. And then you get one or two questions in and they're like, oh, you're not the right person for us, and it's just the interview process is set up for social extroverts or persuasive types. And it's not set up for someone who doesn't show emotion on their face or doesn't, is maybe not as articulate. And that may be completely different than even what the job requires, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're a salesperson and you like, that's one thing. But if you're a creative or you're a computer programmer or you're, someone that's sitting in front of a computer or like those other skills aren't as important. But that's kind of what you're being judged on.
I think that's human nature, though. Not autistic nature, but I think it's general human nature that it's almost instinctual that we're trying to figure out: are they part of the group? Are they safe? Mm-hmm. Are they one of us? And we often fail the "are they one of us" thing because we don't, again, show the emotionality to show all the different things that you already mentioned in the interview. Yeah. But that's. I do a lot in the autism and work, neurodiversity at work space. And this is kind of an ongoing conversation amongst people in all different companies that are involved with it. And everybody says, okay, we just need to change the interview process. But my point is, we can't change human instinct. And if human instinct is, if you don't make eye contact with me, that I'm going to have less trust with you than if you do make eye contact with me. We can train somebody as much as we want, but instinct is still instinct. And mm-hmm. you can't completely overcome it. What I like to look at is, I think it's and I won't say it's 50-50. Maybe it's 70-30. Maybe it's 70% that the companies need to change processes, but there's still 30% that the autistic or other neurodistinct condition person needs to learn to do. And mm-hmm. you had mentioned masking a couple times. And I think there's something between masking, and to me, masking is trying to emulate those around you to fit in. And I think there's an in-between, and I refer to it as tools. And a tool would be something such as, well, the question you said, tell me about yourself. I think we can mm-hmm. just about say 99.9% of all interviews are going to start with, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, there's a real simple tool around that one. Write the story out ahead of time. Yeah. So when you go in, don't memorize the story, but memorize the bullet points. So it's coming across as being explained in real time, but you already have down in the general bullet points of what it is you're going to say, so that you can get through it. And to me, that's not masking. That's accepting that the people on the other side, just instinct, human nature, wanted to feel some background, to feel some connection to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I agree.
Make the story 100%. Ahead of time. That's it. Yeah. I know I'm going to get asked that.
Yeah. I think a lot of what I found disturbing and talking or hearing the stories is companies, some have DEI programs and when someone that's autistic, they said, I just want a basic accommodation. Like, could you provide the questions ahead of time? Or met with, oh, that wouldn't be fair to the other job applicants. And it's like, what they're doing is that's equality, and what they're asking for is equity, which is giving me what I need so I could be successful in the interview.
It's funny you say that. I was at the panel discussion. I was one of the panel members for the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce. And I think it's the first neurodiversity chamber of commerce in the world. And one of the attendees was the head of the neurodiversity, which really fits into the DEI program there, for DIA, Denver International Airport. And what they were asking was, how can I answer my superiors who are asking, or really saying it wouldn't be fair to give those people the interview questions ahead of time? And my response is real simple. give it to everybody. Is your interview so friggin' secret that there's something in there? I mean, if you're going to ask a specific role-related question, well, you don't have to put what that question is. You can just say, we're going to ask a role-related question dealing with the specific skills that you are being hired for. But we're going to ask you about, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your education. Tell us about, I mean, come on. Is that top secret information?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I was talking with a colleague and she referenced, I think it's what her husband received. This may be from Kodak. I can't remember the company, but I think it was Kodak. Anyways, when he went for the interview, they provided him with a document ahead of time and it spelled everything out. I'm like, and it's like, this is where you need to go. This is who you're going to meet with and who they are. These are the times you're meeting with them. This is what you need to wear. These are the questions we're going to ask you related to this job that we're hiring you for. I mean, it basically spelled it all out. Like, this is how your day or time is going to go with us. And this is how the interview process is going to work. And everybody gets that.
Right.
And it's like, it solves so many problems for an autistic person because you have expectations. It's like, oh, I know what to expect. I know, like, this is what they're going to ask me. I can come prepared for this thing. It's like, wow, that should be the norm. And it just requires a little bit of effort on the company's part to put that together. And it would solve, for me, a lot of some equity issues that folks are having in the interview process.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that's one of the big suggestions when companies want to become more neuro-inclusive in their hiring efforts is you've got to tell the person exactly, as you say, who are you going to be talking to? I mean, give me the links to their LinkedIn profile so I can actually go feel like I know that person when I go to talk to them. What are the schedules? Is there a lunch break in there? Is there breaks between going from person A to person B? All these things that I've interviewed a lot. I got fired so many times. I went and wrote a book about Geek's Guide to Interviews, 15 critical items for the technical type. And so I've interviewed a huge amount, and they vary all over. You don't know. Are you going to walk in and be presented in front of a panel of 5 people talking to you at the same time, which is a total different thing you need to be prepared for? Or are you going to be shuffled for 45 minutes and then the next person in 45 minutes and the next person? Well, are there breaks in between? Is it okay to ask, can I take a bathroom break between one of these things? You just don't know. And I think anybody, whether neurotypical, neurodistinct, it really doesn't matter. Nobody knows. I think the only difference is neurotypicals are better with kind of faking and going along with the flow without letting it get them too flustered. Whereas for particularly autistic individuals, you get flustered when things start going in ways different than you anticipated them going. So then your interview capability goes down into the toilet because now you're just flustered. You're just not presenting your best self anymore because it went totally different than you thought the interview would go, and not your performance, but I mean just the way the interview was staged.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think expectations as an autistic person is really, really helpful. Like I don't know if you're this way, but I look at my calendar and I like mentally prepare myself for the day for like, this is who I'm going to meet with. This is what I need to think about before I get there. And kind of look at my day and my week. And I do that like sometimes multiple times a day just to reorient myself for what's coming. Because I think I do much better when I'm like prepared for something and there's not this, unexpected thing happens that I didn't know about.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I definitely, I do the similar of looking at the calendar so I can try and make sure that I wrap up whatever I'm doing before with enough time to allow me to transition well into the next one. And there's nothing worse than 3 hours of back-to-back meetings where there's zero transition time between them. And you just jump from one thing straight to the next thing. And it just becomes a blur. It becomes so draining on me by the time I'm done. I mean, I do okay through them, but by the time I'm done, I am just wiped out for the day because it was just so draining because I wasn't able to kind of close off one, prepare, and move into the next one.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely makes it tough. Makes it real tough. So what's your goals on doing the neurodiversity autism kind of advocacy? What do you see yourself doing there?
Yeah, I'm still kind of figuring it out. Like right now, like with our business, we're, in the process of reshoring our manufacturing here to Virginia. I think we're going to get hopefully some attention from it because we figured out how to, really improve performance and lower our costs to where we're very competitive, if not more competitive than the imports, making electric motor type products. And so part of what I'm wanting to do is build our company and profile to have some street cred to go out and start speaking more about autism, really more from an awareness standpoint. And I think where the opportunity is not so much in speaking with other autistic folks as it is raising awareness with neurotypicals about what autism is and what autistic folks need to be their best self and to be successful in society. I think to me, that's, I could be wrong, but that's, at least that's, a year or two of this is kind of where I've kind of fallen out in terms of like, if I want to help other autistic people, it's really, getting out, speaking and writing to neurotypicals.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you 100%. There's nothing wrong with helping other autistic individuals, mentoring them, whether it's for interviews or whatever. But that's not going to change the world. I mean, it's going to help one person, which is wonderful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with helping one person. I do that frequently. But to change the world, which it kind of sounds like it's your goal. My goal, I've always said, is to change how businesses interact with autistic and other neurodistinct individuals globally. And I've had the good luck of, actually, it was the first speaking gig I ever got was for a company that has employees in every time zone around the world. So I guess I kind of almost made my goal in a certain way on the first one I ever did. But you're right. It's that awareness of other individuals. And I always like to say, and particularly when I'm doing manager kind of training, if all I get out of this is for the person to just stop for 5 seconds and think, maybe it's not the way I'm thinking it is. Maybe they're coming from a completely different perspective. And that perspective may be an autistic perspective. It may be an ADHD perspective. It may be a dyslexic perspective. But just stop and just for that little pause to think, maybe it's not that they're being dishonest because they won't look me in the eye. Maybe they're just coming from a different culture. Because if you do that, I think that makes so much difference, because now it's not just the instinct of, oh, they're not one of us. They actually paused for a second and put some cognitive thought into, oh, maybe there's something different here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. I've seen a number of other autistic folks trying to advocate, and sometimes I've learned enough that you can't like tell people they're bad or beat people over the head.
Right.
If you want them to change, it doesn't work. Like I can understand the frustration and why they are saying things as strongly as they are, but I think you almost have to kind of, how do you meet people halfway and provide education and to get people to, like you said, understand on a higher level what's going on. Because I think most people inherently are really good people. You just don't always know, you just have your life experiences and you have, what you've been taught and what you've lived. And it, you don't know what you don't know. And I think, to me, I think that's really where the opportunity is, because I think most people want to do the right thing. they just have no idea.
I'm with you 1,000% on that. We find people out there, but
Sure.
it's such a tiny, tiny minority. I think it's exactly what you say. Most people want to do the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is. And because they don't, they come off as being biased or bigoted towards the group. But that's not because that they're a kind of person that wouldn't if they knew a different story, if they knew a different way. But again, there are some out there that no matter what, you can tell them any story you want, and they're going to, I guess I'm not a Taylor Swift follower, but her sort of line of haters will always be haters. I mean, yeah, there's some of those out there, but you're right. I think the vast majority of people, they want to do good. They want to help other people. They want to be good community members that help other community members. And I think our job is really to help them have that information so that they can be, good community members and supporters of people who think differently. And to me, that's what being neurodistinct is all about. We just perceive, process, and think differently than they do. That's not bad. It's actually a good thing. It's good to have different perspectives. Sometimes we're actually right, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I think for a business, it's competitive as things are. You really need different points of view, to get the best result. I don't think you necessarily want one type of thinking or one viewpoint. It's a bit limited, especially if there's folks that bring so much to the table in terms of thought process and thinking through details that other people have just completely missed. And so I think the trend will get better for autistic folks in the workplace, but I think it's really just an awareness issue.
Yeah, I think so too. I always like to say on the perspective thing, I feel like I belong when people will consider my ideas as if they potentially could be right. Not that I'm right every time, but if they'd at least look at it like going, maybe there's something there. Let's really look at this instead of just saying, oh, that's not how we do it. That's weird. I think that's really what you're kind of saying too, is you want that variety of perspective. And obviously if you've got 10 different perspectives, you're probably 7 of them are not really fitting based on what you're trying to do. But probably out of 3 of them, there's a composite that really is the perspective you wouldn't have had on your own that is going to be helpful. But you never know which 3 it's going to be, or which 2 or which 5 at any given moment. So you've got to take every one and say, maybe there's something here. Let's really look at what's here, not just, no, that's not how we do it.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's like Steve Jobs had a line where the best ideas should win. And I that's to me very autistic thinking, where it's like, it's not the most senior person in the room. It's not the loudest person in the room. It's like, yeah, who has the best idea? Is this the best way to move our business or organization forward? And that's what we should do, not by who said it,
right,
or other politics or dynamics,
right,
of
exactly.
an environment. Yeah.
Well, this has been great chatting with you, and gosh, I could probably chat with you for hours more. We have so many common interests, but unfortunately, I think we all have things we got to do. So, in wrapping up, if people want to reach out to you, what's going to be the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Yeah, I would say the best way is through LinkedIn. Peter Mann, MANN, just Peter-Mann. Is my, I guess, link or URL on LinkedIn. And feel free to connect or, message me. I'm, happy to get back with anyone, especially if it's around neurodiversity or autism.
Well, perfect. I will go look it up exactly so I can get the URL, full URL exactly, and put it down in the show notes so that it will make it real easy for people to find you. And I thank you so much for joining us, for spending this time, and would look forward to having another chat in the future. Maybe we can figure out a few things we can do together to push this whole thing of getting employment in. So thank you so much, Peter. It's been such a great time having a chat with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
We hope that you've enjoyed another episode of Life in a Neurotypical Universe. please, if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends. Go take their phone and subscribe them. Hey, it will help us all out. If you want to know more about neurodiversity or have any questions for me, you can reach me at my website, timgoldstein.com, where I'll be more than glad to help you as best I can to navigate through the neurotypical universe.